Go
you're
ahead
ready,
and
you may
share my
share your
screen.
screen
Mm-hmm.
and show us your work.
Mm-hmm. Can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay. So this color star explains the choices of the colors in my project. I first picked the three primary colors and then combined them with their secondary and tertiary colors, treating them each as its own family. My inspiration of this projects are the 2468 house and the sale house. I'm not able to, oh yeah. The 2468 house by Morphosis and the extension of the same house, the sale house by Johnston Markley. The 2468 house studio has each window on its four sides, painted bright yellow, the blue lintels, and the red scrubber. The sale house takes this platonic geometry and primary color into another level, using bright pink, turquoise, and yellow orange, making this as the shaped volumes rather than the direct application. And leaving the living room the white space so that they reflect the vibrant colors. Each color can be seen from the street from their respective windows. So making my project somewhat the third generation of this, I took the concept further to shape my project, having the view of different color ceilings from the street. This is the 19th Street, 3rd Street, New York. As you can see, it's a very small lot. So this is the exploded view of my project. As you can see, these are like three different families, blue, red, and yellow, having a gap in the middle, a neutral gap. So what I started doing is making the tertiary color sandwiched between the primary and the secondary color. Primary and secondary color acting like the ceiling and the floor respectively on each floors, and tertiary acting as both. I separated the private and the public spaces by introducing a neutral gap in the middle as the garden gap. This acts like a neutral space in this colorful building. I have two types of circulation, and I kept the circulation neutral so that you can see the transition of colors when you walk by. One circulation is in the center of the building, which is inside. When you walk by, you see the transition of the floor and the ceiling. And one is on the outside of the building, which gives a comparative view of outside and the inside. The section shows the different activities and the different color of wall and ceiling and how it acts the activity on each floor. The second basement and the first basement, being the blue family, acts as the tertiary color blue-green in the middle, the green and the blue. Basement 2 being the auditorium, basement 1 being the archive space. This acts like a library and being more cozy and a soothing space. This is the ground floor. This has the entrance from the street and entrance to an outdoor space, which is behind the building. This has the colors of red, red, violet in the middle, and then violet at the bottom. This first floor has the viewing gallery to the outdoor space as well as the exhibition space. This shows the transition of two different violets coming together and creating a horizon. This is the second floor. This is very, very neutral space, being in middle of the color spaces. I kept this as a very subtle green space, being in this concrete jungle, so that this defines all the program and acts like a hangout spaces for both private and public spaces. This is the third floor. The third floor and the fourth floor are the yellow family, the third floor being the studios, and the fourth floor being the office. This has the colors yellow, orange, and yellow, orange. This is my last slide. This concludes my project by showing the different ceilings from the street and the garden gap in the middle to show that there's a relief in the middle. When you walk by, you can see like just one floor in the starting, and when you enter, there's a element of surprise knowing that there is a floor and a ceiling, but you somewhat know it because there are white walls on the corners and they refract and reflect the vibrant colors. Thank you.
Thank you, Deepika.
Thank you.
So, Deepika, I'm not sure I understood. The color is in the ceiling and in the floor, but never
Yes.
on the walls, no?
No, no. There are two different colors. One is on the ceiling and one is on the floor. They both are different. So they create a gradient on the wall together.
Yeah. I think that, yeah, that's what I thought, but I wasn't sure. Yeah, that's really great. I think that's a really great strategy, and very effective way of create. I mean, first of all, that the standard application usually is on the walls, no? When people think when they are home decorating, no, they paint their walls. So to have that application on the ceiling and the floor, and then let the walls borrow from that, I think it shows in your project as a very effective way of using color. And I think also it's something that starts coming across in your renderings is that there's this other effect that comes from the reflectivity, no, which you haven't talked so much about. But then, so you have the gradient, but then, and I was wondering how that really would play off, because then as the materials appear reflective, they start polluting each other, let's say, no, which I guess is part of the whole intent of your project. No? So it starts with a very, very simple diagrammatic scheme of these color planes, and then it's all about that kind of intermingling of the two, no? Of that the sandwich. What is the result of these colors polluting each other, no? Polluting in a good way, no?
Yeah,
so,
because they're analogous colors, so they're only producing a more subtle gradient between them, you know, because they're not complementary. They're always next to each other. So they're always just, when they mix, they just expand the range, which is very interesting.
Yeah.
That's why I kept them as in one range, like one blue analogous family is one range, and then red is one and yellow is one. Rather than mixing them up, I let them mix each other up and then give like a different gradient on the walls.
Yeah, and yeah, and that and also during, because that mix depends on the kind of material properties, no, like we were talking about, the degree of reflectivity of materials, also in the walls, as in how much color is going to bounce, no. So if you were to develop this project further, I think those were things that you would need to start to think about. So how do you enhance or mute this effect through material finishes, no? And then yeah, and I think that's really great.
Thank you.
Okay, I really like the simplicity of your project, how you've taken the diagram or the partie and you just built it. You said this is how it's going to be painted. But it's really beautiful, and I also, as I'm just thinking about, okay, it's really simple application. Now, how do we dig a little deeper? And you know, in some of these renderings, you show everything as being glossy, and especially the blue ones and the purple ones. And then as we get to the orange, it gets a little bit not matte, but more matte, right? And so I wonder, could we also go from matte to glossy as we go through the whole building, for example? So maybe
that was the whole intent of it. Yes.
Okay, so maybe at the bottom or vice versa. I would think glossy at the top, just because you have more light coming in, maybe, and at the bottom it's more matte. Or is it all glossy except for that floor where there's no color? And is that matte? Is that like a white, rough concrete, and everything else is glossy paint, or it's the black painted acrylic, right? And then as you start to think about the finishes of the furniture in the, let's see, I think it's the offices, the orange offices, you show a wood desk, maybe a reception desk. And again, I think, oh, that's exactly the right material, that you would use this really warm brown wood. And so all of the desks and the chairs are this warm brown. But then when you're in the purple space, maybe it's a deep purple, almost black leather, right? And so you start to tap into the glossiness or the saturation through the material that you're choosing for the furniture. I think the lighting is important too, and you never show the light source, which is important, except for in the intermediate floor, the white concrete floor. But I'm not sure those pendant fixtures are the right ones. I think, again, maybe you should always conceal the light source. So we're never looking at that point, but we're just understanding the surface of color and the transformation or the transition of color. I even wonder if you should have the green plants there. I kind of think it should just all be white concrete, and that's like our palette cleanser. Right? We walk through the building.
They want to introduce like sorry, go ahead.
No, it's funny that you said about light fixtures, because, you know, Deepika was rendering these with these kind of generic black recessed, a grid of recessed lights. And it just became self-evident that lighting is important, but it should never be seen. And so it was better to kind of study the effect visually without necessarily yet knowing exactly how you would do it, than to reduce it to the most banal technical solution, you know? But I think it's like the project is so interesting because I think it's taken a long time for it to become a simple diagram. You know, in a way, it's taken a lot of editing and a lot of figuring out how to make it seem really direct. So it's almost this like full color minimalism, you know, where it's like a super clear. And then each level is almost this kind of like sublime space. And I think, I think it's interesting to figure out how to declutter, how to keep it decluttered, or how to inhabit it in a way that's sympathetic to the atmosphere that's been set up.
Yeah, like in that floor, the white concrete floor, I think the green brings a nice, the plant life, the foliage brings a nice texture, but maybe that texture would be better if it were like a furry white rug and a furry white sofa.
I totally agree. I think that neutral, that's perfect. I think that there's the gesture of texture and depth, all of a sudden, anything that absorbs light in there. I think that I love that matte finish, and I love that you called it a palette cleanser. I think that's like so spot on. That's what that floor needs to be. And I had that same visceral reaction to those pendants hanging. And what it made me think about then was the stark contrast to the other floors. And for each image, I think it's become so powerful that they're not really occupied spaces, that we're really just looking at the space. And then, you know, Igor's word of the sublime, I think, is very true too. Like that is what we're reminded that our sense of scale and depth has completely changed because of the immersion of the color and how it's washing down the walls, and we don't quite know what's where. And it actually reminded me of the experience. I don't know if you've ever been out to Marfa, to the Chinati, when they had all the Dan Flavin exhibits. And so what Dan Flavin had was, there are these U-shaped buildings, and you enter in on the long legs of the U, and at the bottom of the U is where his exhibit is. And it's Dan Flavin, he works with fluorescent tubes, and they're different colors. But you walk in and there's nothing else in there, and you walk along the entire length of that leg, and your proximity to the color source and the light source grows. But really what's happening is you're becoming part of the exhibit for the next person behind you, because your body is being absorbed as, it's coming in and out of focus as a silhouette in that space. And so it's a full experience of it's not just that light bulb being the art installation, but it's the interaction of viewing it. And so I think that's happening in your building. I think that the interaction of moving through those spaces, and then it could be almost completely empty, perhaps save the palette cleanser. And perhaps it's everything in there is a little bit unusual. We don't quite know how to use it, maybe. But then when we go to the subterranean levels and you get into that turquoise floor, and it's like so playful, and all of those pods hanging from the ceiling. So we're still quite, existing in that sublime territory. It's just now we get to kind of be still in that our experience of being part of the display. So I think that there's that level of playfulness that just comes out of that is really, really sophisticated in your project. So I really appreciate that. And so I would, I'd really push back against all those conventional furniture items and lighting sources that you're using.
And I think this is another project because you're proposing the glass facade, and you have the color on the floor and the ceiling, that it's going to be an amazing nighttime project. And so to not render it in the full sun view, but to render the nighttime view, like this beacon of color, right? It's going to be really beautiful.
Yeah, I actually did one for one of my class, the nighttime of this building, and it was beautiful. But I had to add the recess lights because I wanted to show how the nightlife works, and it was really beautiful. I did it for the other class though, of the same building.
Any last comments before we take a look at the last project? No? Well, really nice job, Deepika. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, really delightful to see. We have one more